For the joint meeting, I'll call the fiscal court to order. Justin had to leave, his son's sick, so we still have a quorum. So I'll call the fiscal court to order February 11th for the special call joint meeting with the Riverport Board.
Oh, I need, I'll call the special call Riverport. These together, we do have a quorum. Andy, Jim, Brad, you. So there's 5 of us out of 8, so we can only sit in here. But, I think when we first got the agenda, we thought we could do more things, but after talking to our Riverport attorney, and then I know he had a conversation with Jason, we can't, I mean, as far as the dissolution and the surplus of our vehicles and our assets, I believe that if you all decide to dissolve you in the city, then you all will decide what to do with those assets.
Correct.
There's not really anything for us to do on that. We will have to take action on the checking account since Bob Gold and Josh are no longer members and they were the 2 signees. We'll have to sign off on that. I will sort of refer to Jason because he sort of talked to Greg on like sort of where we need to go or how I know you sort of talked to Greg and y'all sort of, I think, are on the same page on how things need to happen.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the only action item that needs to be addressed today is just getting that checking account signature figured out, because the port is a creature of fiscal court and Calvert City action, so it can't dissolve itself.
Right.
It couldn't create itself, so it can't dissolve itself. And then the statute says upon dissolution, the assets are divided between the 2 entities, so that Calvert and the fiscal court will decide on what to do with any assets that the authority has. So like I said, the only action item is this checking account signature, because we do have, like you said, Bob Gold and Josh going off, so we just need to have 2 authorized signature persons appointed.
And I think to make sure I understood, the port, I know the fiscal court, we all understood that the dissolving is the county and the city. But I think the port was at a point where their recommendation, that's what, we were going to have a discussion as far as we got some new members, just to kind of give a short background as far as the Riverport. But the port's recommendation to dissolve could be an action item as far as the port making the decision that that's their
Requested action.
Requested action.
I
Yes.
understand that we can
And
do
that's-
recommendations, we just
Yes.
couldn't take action on it.
Yes. So I think there might have been some confusion there, but that's really, we know that the city and the county is going to be the one to have that discussion.
And it's also come to our attention, and it was before any of our time on any of us on the board, that there is another asset. Is that?
Yeah.
That's where it is.
Judge, when we looked through, I went through to make sure that we were identifying all the assets before we started having the discussion about dissolution. In 2007, there was a 30,000 gallon per day package plant that was purchased. I have no knowledge of where that's at. I wasn't really aware that this was owned by the Port Authority. It appears that this was a package plant that was bought or coordinated with Calvert City Water and Sewer. So just moving forward, you guys probably want to, I think the port paid like $9,000 for it, so it wasn't a tremendous amount of money. But then again, we don't want to go through this and that not be identified. But other than that, everything that everything that the Port Authority owns would be the 48-acre tract that we refer to as the Thorn Tract, the 21 acres south of the Thorn Tract, which we refer to as the Lofton Tract. That tract was bought to offset wetlands. The port vehicle, and this package plant, and then the checking and savings account. which have somewhere around $1.7 million. But I didn't want to.
We didn't want to hide it.
Yeah.
Because
Sure.
it would come out later.
Well, we didn't
We didn't
want
really
to.
know about it.
We didn't want to neglect, that asset, and as we're going through this, I think everything needs to be very transparent and very accountable. So,
Do we know where it's at?
I do not, Judge. I've short of going through and identifying all the assets, just to double check and make sure it popped up.
It was purchased in 2007. It looks like Don Heiss was sort of, I think that he was probably over the water board at that time in Calvert. So I'm not for sure, it's not really something we can ask him anymore. Most of these, 300 members of, are gone that were on here. But it looks like Greg sort of facilitated this and he was still the attorney. So I don't think he even remembers. So that's just something we probably need to look in or ask him about.
Kevin Murphy, you might be able to ask him, he was over the water.
Okay.
Kevin?
And Roger may know, I don't know.
Josh, do you want to give a kind of a background as far as the port's position, I guess, original intent of where the county and city were going and where we are today?
Yeah, so the port was officially formed, I believe, in 2001 as an interlocal agreement between the city of Calvert and the Marshall County Fiscal Court as a developing port. So a master plan was completed, Judge, and at that time it encompassed about a 1,600 acre port corridor, okay? That was identified as that river port area, so to speak. The port didn't control any of that property at the time. However, a project developed that there was grant funding available at the time for property acquisition. That property was acquired and then sold to this project, which is where the funds that exist are really from that. The city and the county decided to contribute to the port evenly for many years, $80,000 a piece each year, which, to this point where we are now with the bank accounts and the other items that are owned, you kind of break even, right? I mean, it's, up until this point, whatever's been put into the port by the city and the county, should it dissolve, can be split up, and then basically everybody gets their money back, so to speak. So this idea of a large inland port development came, at the anticipation of a large amount of container traffic coming from the Panama Canal expansion and some other large distribution kind of things happening. This was before 9/11, or right around that time period, and then also before the recession that we had in 2007-8, and so on. So things have changed a lot by way of funding mechanisms at the state and federal level. This is a very large project. The port corridor that was identified, it's challenged by infrastructure. I won't say infrastructure issues, just the lack of infrastructure that's there. It's a great site for a large industry to locate because of the size and scope of the property. But the Port Authority, nor the city or the county, well, the city was gifted 150 acres by Peanut Hollinger, but Mr. Hollinger is still including that property in his overall plan for development, okay? The port doesn't own but 48 to 50 acres. That's, south of the P&O Railway. That site was bought not for an industrial site. That site was bought for a rail storage car site at the time. And so 2-3 years ago, we were really in a situation where this large, overwhelming project that we didn't own any property for, there was just not much we could do with the resources that we had. So we as a board decided to look at this from a 30,000-foot view and go back to the original master plan and identified the most cost-efficient, realistic, tangible project that we could do, and that was a road connection project from McFarland to 1523. That project was going to also incorporate finishing McFarland Road, building a new bridge over Little Cypress Creek. That was about a $5.5 million project. We had roughly $2 million to work with. And so we met jointly with the city and the county at the time. There was some discussion on our end. We had, preliminary engineering put together. To be honest, it just didn't seem like there was that much interest in doing that project on either side, which, to be honest with you, we weren't necessarily pushing that project because it was a road to property that, for the most part, we didn't own. So it wouldn't really not have been an effective use of those funds. So all that said to say this, at my resignation from the board, it's been made apparent to me over the last handful of years that it's time to make those resources available to both the city and the county. This is a positive step forward, in my opinion, for the city and for the county to be able to recoup these funds and put them towards projects that are happening now versus an idea that came up almost 20 years ago. And I think it's a good time to do that because I think that it makes sense. We're not, if we continue to go the same way, I fear that there's going to be very little impact to what we're trying to accomplish or what that overall master plan was. I'm not sure that those funds would be used or could be used for anything that would set us forward in this plan. So that's where we are.
We did try to even come up with another plan, there was more property, and we even,
We come together as a board, but when you look at the 50 acres that we have now, you're looking at $15 million for public amenities on that. And I thought that when we had that joint meeting, that cost, even splitting that with the city, was more infrastructure than it was, developing the property for a company or manufacturing. And with the property that we've looked at, the environmental study didn't come back, and I think this is where we've all come together and realized that with what we've got, there's just no sense in continuing on as a board and holding these funds up. It's time to dissolve the board and move on, and I'm comfortable with that, and I think it's the right thing to do for the taxpayers.
Right.
So that's where I'm at.
It just seems very irresponsible on our part, as a quasi-governmental board, and then, representing the city and the county on this board, for us to continue sitting on these dollars that are significant when put into very real projects for the city and the county separately. It seems very irresponsible for us to sit on those dollars while you guys are having conversations about how you're going to do XYZ projects that are, pertinent to your purpose, whether it's infrastructure, economic development, community development, whatever it might be. So I just think it's time. And, again, I think this is a positive step forward for both communities. I think that you can accomplish a whole lot more separately that leads to cohesiveness more than saying you've got something that's cohesive and not doing anything. Does that make sense?
And just so the court knows that, Peanut Hollinger has been active outside of county and city government on his own property. But the county, I know Josh's office, how many projects have we?
So, yes, and that's a really good point. So, we're making, Captain Hollinger's project, and he controls the majority of that 1,400 acres or so. We're making that a very pertinent part of our marketing strategy and economic development because of the size and scope of that site, the river being right there in the front yard and the rail in the backyard. We're marketing that site actively, and at the same time, responding to RFIs for projects, requests for information from the cabinet or whoever it might be that's, wanting to submit that site for specific projects. And so over the last year, we've probably submitted that site through our office. Now, this is not what Peanut's doing on his end, but, to ensure that it's delivered professionally and timely to the cabinet for consideration, we probably submitted 5 or 6 projects through those various channels.
Yeah, so just so the court knows that, when Mr. Hollinger has asked us to help, Josh has been helping. One of the things, to go back to what Josh was saying, when we had our joint meeting with the fiscal court and the city council and the board, what was that, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
A year and a half ago, maybe? At the time, we had just started negotiations with the landowners for Southwest One. So we had a comparable project that was $3.8 million. So when you looked at the total dollars that were involved in just building a road, to where we could actually get an industrial park, you can see the tangible project compared to, this is a massive project. Try and create jobs in our county or in the city. And so, and two, the state denied the bridge grant, so that was $1.2 million. That was a huge component to this project that he's talking about. So I just want to make sure that the court's aware of that. I know I talked to Bob. He's in the same agreement. It seems like to me that it's not going to be a government port. It's just not going to be a government port. It's going to be a port in our community. It's going to be a private port, is the way it looks like to me.
Yeah, and Judge, I think it's worth noting that we have to think outside of the box in this situation. If there's a need for collaboration with a public port authority for whatever reason it might be, whether it's Mr. Hollinger or another project, Paducah-McCracken County Port Authority is just, it's not far from and they're operational. They have resources that we don't have. They have, they've got a port director with experience in, the business of a port. And so, that's there in case it's needed, And there's also things we can do at the local level outside of the scope of trying to bite off such a huge piece of responsibility.
Do we know the cost for the infrastructure if we had to put a cost?
If we were looking at the entire plan
port.
for highway accessibility to I-24, port development, yeah, you're probably looking somewhere, I think the last figures that I come up with were maybe somewhere around $70 million.
I know we went to Owensboro Port, and that, if I remember correctly, that was about a $50 million port.
I think 70 million is, yeah, and I think 70 million is probably including
Well, that was 50.
land acquisition. So you're even without owning the land and all the infrastructure and necessary, you're probably looking at over 20, maybe closer to $30 million.
Yes, small. The 1.8 million funds that are available, are they sitting in some account accruing interest or not?
Yes.
You got checking and savings, you got part of it checking, part of it savings.
So these funds are growing annually, but I know it's small, but the rate.
Yes, they are. Yeah, they're drawing interest.
We have to bid those out every year.
And is there any way that we can work with the private party, throwing our funds behind him in order to have some future revenue?
Great question.
I would recommend that any participation moving forward would be based on performance of jobs created, rather than this speculation of development. And that's come up in the past, and what we found, at least in my tenure on the port, is that we had a lot of opportunity to put funds behind expected projects that never really developed, and that can get you in a really tricky situation. Public money.
We have to remember this is a private endeavor. If we're going to take, I'm assuming it's all taxpayers' money.
I mean, yeah, it's, like I say, the city and the county have contributed over the years. To this point, that contribution is equal to roughly the sale of, the profit from the sale of property to a project way back when. And so you're kind of at a break-even point where,
How long, I don't even know how long the city and county put in, because y'all haven't, nobody's put in for the last
16. It's 2016.
So, I mean, it's, yeah. So, I mean, you could look at it either way. Either you've used your contributions as an operating cost, or you're dividing up the profit from the sale of that property. I think you 6 one way, half a dozen. Either way, it's public money. Either way. And it needs to be accounted for, and it needs to be put to good use.
I personally feel that we've held up progress, that's what we've got. You guys need to be able to have access to that, do what y'all need to do, and I feel like the city does as well.
Sounds like it's going nowhere, so.
Absolutely, it is. It's, I think everybody's tried, but it just comes to the point where you have to make this decision and go forward, and that's where we're at. So,
I think it's just hard in Calvert City. There's very little land that's not already owned. You're in the flood zone. You deal with businesses, all my businesses are, down there. I mean, there's land's just hard to come by. It's not already it doesn't have infrastructure in that area that where everybody wants to be. And Peanut has it on, it's on or Sunny Bailey, or, they all have privately owned all the way through the riverfront.
So yeah, again, I'm not on the board anymore. They've got me until the end of June to kind of act as an administrator. And so I would say that this is probably the most positive impact that the port will have ever had in making a decision to seek you all out to dissolve this thing. And I'm not speaking for the board when I say this, but to dissolve this thing so that those funds become available to both the city and the county to do pertinent projects that hopefully are related to economic or community development. And I think that we're taking a lot of great strides forward in Marshall County as a whole. And why not include this in that?
Do y'all have any?
I guess my only other question may be to direct it to Jason. What action do we need to take on our part of the fiscal court to move forward to dissolve this?
Well, you don't have to do anything today, but the port authorities, they can, number one, they got to do the checking account, and then they can can vote today on their recommendation, on what to do going forward.
So
I'll go ahead. Yeah, I'll make a motion if it's okay with you, Brad. I think that you've been over here, you can sign on the action that you have. So that's okay.
Maybe just sort of that way, there's one in the city and one in the county, there's not really questions.
You okay?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
And then as far as what to do next between the county and the city,
I'll second that.
Yeah. No, in favor?
as far as what to do next, that can either be a discussion that Greg and I have, Greg being the city attorney for Calvert, or, maybe even a joint session between Calvert City Council and Fiscal Court. But still, the board needs to vote to recommend the
Well,
solution to both.
Yeah, and I think that the way I understood it was that the meeting today was the wishes of the board. I know, Dan, you contacted me and asked if the fiscal court would sit down with the Riverport board. I believe the mayor was contacted as well, so bringing us together so that, one, this is new for the two of you to some degree. I know some of you are familiar with the Riverport, but as far as what we had discussed in the prior meetings, so this was more or less a joint meeting to sit down. But as
I think everything should be on the table, and
Yes.
everybody should go behind each other's backs or whatever going on.
Yes.
I feel very pulled, to be honest, I'm very much a Calvert City girl, 100% because of my family, but also want the county to do well too, and, I've never really, Josh is taking care of most of things, and sort of things are sort of putting, lucking all out, and, I just, whatever's best for the city and the county, which I think is dissolving it, because I think we've sort of done everything that we can do out of, I've been on it close, my husband did almost 8 years, so I've been on it for close to 8 years. We don't have the resources or the money to do what we want to do. It'd be nice, but we don't. And
Well,
this way, it sort of benefits the city and the county.
nobody's benefiting from $2 million sitting in the bank drawing interest when it
Correct.
should be going to work for the people.
It all comes down to accountability.
Mhm.
That's what we're all here today, have that joint meeting to go forward, have that accountability.
One question that I have, Jason, as far as currently the port pays Greg for his legal services. Since we're looking at the city and county working together on this, would it be appropriate for us to not be in a situation where the port's incurring more cost on legal fees and that be the responsibility of the city and am I making sense? 'Cause I'm afraid we're gonna get into a situation where,
Because Greg handles all of our stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we have a monthly bill, anytime, talk to him or whatever, he charges us for that. I mean, that's sort of how it's always been.
now that we're kind of parlaying that to the city and the county, should we really even be incurring those?
Probably not, no.
Okay.
You've stated your recommendation, and now it's the ball's in the county and city's
Okay.
court, so
Okay.
there's not really anything else for y'all to do.
Okay.
No, I would agree. I
And-
don't think there's not anybody else here from the city, and I hope I'm not out of order.
Nope.
But I want to thank you, Dan, and I want to thank all of you for what I feel like is making a very responsible decision, and I'm only speaking for myself. But, and I think Calvert City wants to do well, but we want the county to do well also. And I think this is a very prudent and a very wise decision and move that y'all made, and I just want to commend you for it.
Thank you.
And you all meet tonight,
We
correct?
do meet tonight.
Is that on you all's agenda to talk about tonight? I don't.
I don't know if it'll be on the agenda, but I have been told that it will be discussed tonight. So if any of you would like to come, I would highly recommend that you come tonight. If you could, it's at 5:30.
So as far as the joint meeting that the fiscal court's heard from the port, I know the port basically can take action as far as their recommendation. out of this as a fiscal court, because we're gonna go back into the budget. But I don't think, unless y'all have any other questions.
Is this an action item?
The
Well-
court's recommendation,
Yeah.
you're not doing a dissolve.
Yeah.
Recommend the recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah, the
For
board,
the
that's where
purposes of
confusion-
for the purposes of the city and the county bodies, should the chairman send a letter with a recommendation to both bodies, or do you need official action on something?
You'll vote, and I'm assuming somebody's
Okay.
taking minutes, right?
I'm taking minutes, so I'll just put it in the minutes. Okay.
You could, and then you've got a
Or a letter,
council
letter be
member
fine.
that's gonna
Minutes or a
probably bring it
letter,
up
either one will be fine.
tonight.
I just think it'd be very healthy for us to have that recommendation from you all.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's not a motion for action to dissolve.
No, it's a
It's a
recommendation.
recommendation.
To dissolve.
Yeah.
Well, I'll motion that, give the motion,
And I'll second.
and everybody needs to say about saying aye to other board members.
Uh,
You want that by tonight, for your meeting? Either.
It would be fine, or I can just tell them, you know, whatever's easiest for you all.
I'll finish the minutes for the meeting, and I'll email them to Dee so that she can disperse those to both bodies collectively. How's
Okay,
that?
and again, you know, I would like to invite any of you that can. I think it would be a great thing if you all could. I hate to ask you to do that on a Monday night, but if you could come to the meeting, I think that would bode well.
Yeah, I'll be there if you have any questions, Ned.
As far as some of these asset items, I know for the fiscal court, I would like to see, I know the land tract, the vehicles with this plan, I'd like to identify the assets, so if we do start discussions with the city council, we need to identify what actual assets we have, because I know looking at the documents with the city county industrial authority, with Benton, the way that interlocal agreement is drafted is the same concept. Whatever the assets are, they have to be identified. So I'm curious that if they still have it. Sounds like there's only a few people that may know where it's at, or.
I can check on that today if you want me to, or
If
I
you
can
would,
check
please.
to see if I can find out anything.
Perfect, thank you.
I don't know.
If y'all don't have any other questions, then as far as the fiscal court, motion to adjourn out of the special called joint meeting with the Riverport.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Thank you all for coming in.
Yes, thank you.
Need to make
We need to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the
I'll second it. All those.